All right, Gordon, you're back again in front of Mr. Singh's office.
Yes.
We'll touch on just why. For those of you who don't know who Gordon Shank is, you're a local businessman, actually won an award for one of the top innovators in BC. And you happened to come last week in front of a small protest with sort of a different message in front of this office, which is why I reached out to you to see what that was about. But before we jump to this interview, if you're unfamiliar with Rebel News, we bring you the other side of the story to all things, and that includes what we're seeing said about the pro-freedom message right now. So if you appreciate that, you can support our independent journalism by donating at rebelnews.com/donate. We don't take a penny from the federal government's media bailout. We rely on people like you, and we are accountable to people like you. So again, that's rebelnews.com/donate.
Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
This Family Day was overshadowed for many in British Columbia if they were the ones eagerly awaiting the decision from the NDP party when it came to the Trudeau government's enacting of the Emergencies Act that gave the government sweeping powers over the widely peaceful truckers and protesters who were calling to an end to COVID-19 mandates in Ottawa, and also allow them to tap into citizens' bank accounts, freeze accounts, and seize some property of the protesters. After all, the NDP had the power, really, when it came to whether such powers would continue before the matter came to the Senate. And when their decision aligned with Justin Trudeau's, it caused a group of NDP voters to protest at their party's leader Jagmeet Singh's office in Burnaby, BC, instead. I wasn't able to catch the impromptu protest, so I met up later with Gordon Shank, a local First Nation entrepreneur and resident who was there at the protest to hear what it was about. Okay, so what brought you to that protest that took place last week out front of Jagmeet Singh's office?
Yeah, actually, I've just walking around town, I bump into all kinds of crazy things, right, all the time. There was a hunger striker here one day. Jagmeet, his arrival in Burnaby was another day, and then I was just walking up the street actually, over to buy some groceries, and there's this protest outside of his office, right, which is kind of unusual because it's been closed for 2 years. Close to the public, right? Yeah. COVID-wise, right? And so I thought, okay, well, what's going on? And I stopped by, and I was reading earlier in the morning, right? My Twitter feed was full of, reports of, a Confederate rebel flag waving white supremacists or kicking up a fuss, right? Yeah. So I thought, well, this can't be that, right? It's all like minority people, right? So it can't be white supremacists. So I thought, well, let's come and see what's going on, right? And apparently there were a lot of NDP people or former NDP people here, and as well as many other kinds of people too. But the idea was to encourage Jagmeet not to empower the Emergency Act, right? That was, being implemented, right?
There's been so many protests across Canada, including in BC, so I didn't find out till I came across your Twitter and saw the post. There was a huge banner on the window that said something along the lines of Jagmeet Singh, Justin Trudeau's puppet. Did you speak to anybody about who put that up and why? Or?
No, well, that was the general sentiment, right? The basic theme was that, Jagmeet is empowering Justin, and it's like a minority politician empowering another more, minority politician to, kind of enact something on the majority, and they felt this to be fundamentally unfair.
Now, I got to wonder how Mr. Singh felt after, vouching, the NDP's vouching for that vote, the Emergency Act, and then just like that, all of a sudden there was no emergency anymore and Trudeau revokes it. But you yourself, you kind of have a backstory with the NDP as well. You kind of mentioned off camera about at one point you actually left BC because of the NDP government.
Yeah, well, I mean, that wasn't the exclusive reason or the only reason. I had a business, right, and I grew that particular business to be the third largest of its kind in Canada. But it was very difficult to grow it more, so I moved to the United States and was able to grow it, a lot bigger than I would be able to do locally. And then, I used to brag, right? I thought, the media in the States, it's crazy, right? This media, everything the government does is bad. The other media, everything the government does is good. So, I used to criticize and, talk to my neighbors and, your media is no good, right? Back in Canada, right, at least they give two sides of the story. At least they're, somewhat fair. At least they're somewhat professional. And then after a decade, I came back and, oh my God, it's worse than America, right? I mean, you have to, like in Burnaby, for example, here, the local media has gone down and down and down and down. We have one weekly tabloid. A weekly tabloid comes once a week. It's given out for free, and in this newspaper, there's like half a page of politics. So if you're into local news, that's basically the limitation, like half a page from a weekly tabloid, right? So yeah, it's not easy to find out. Like anytime I've stumbled across Jagmeet doing this or that or this or that, or even not to do with Jagmeet, like the hunger strike or like, all the other things that are going on, just happen to stumble across it. I walk 20 to 30,000 steps a day and just come across weird things, right?
And I think with the changes that life with COVID brought on, we saw lots of political shifting, even people who identified as conservatives kind of leaving that party. Perhaps some of them are coming back. So it's definitely interesting times. As someone who's been here for a long time, what have you seen change politically in British Columbia or even more locally to the Lower Mainland?
Well, yeah, Burnaby, things are changing. I don't know if it's a change for the better or worse, but in 2011, in Burnaby here, the municipal party, if you want to join it, you have to show your BC NDP membership card. So it's called BCA, but you actually have to be an NDP provincial member to join the local Burnaby party. And then, of course, the BC provincial NDP, they have agreements not to go against the federal NDP, right? So in 2011, in this riding, NDP got 16,000 votes, actually 16,072. In 2015, virtually the same thing, 16,094 votes. And then we had a by-election and the voter participation went way down, around half. So that time, like, who got Jagmeet into Ottawa, into the House of Commons, was roughly 8,800 people here in Burnaby South, right? A tiny fraction of the voter base. And then later on in 2019, once again, NDP 16,000 votes, right? So they're pretty conservative, or not conservative, they're pretty consistent with getting 16,000, votes. And then change in 2021, they actually dropped down to 15,000. Right, 15,000. So that's a change. Yeah. When I moved back here from Canada, I had 18 elected people to represent me. An MP, an MLA, 7 on the school board, 8 on city council, and a mayor. 18 out of 18 were NDP members.
Wow.
Right? And then later on, Kennedy Stewart, the previous MP, NDP, he up and quit. When he qualified for his pension, right, he up and quit, so we had no MP, and then a few more from city council jumped to provincial. So it got to the point where the 18 elected representatives that I have was cut down to 15 NDP people.
And it's interesting, the NDP is supposed to be representative of, the middle working class, but when it came to the truckers, who predominantly, that's exactly who they are, and the people that supported that, Jagmeet Singh definitely took a back seat and kind of went along with the narrative that these are people just spreading hate and up to no good. I wonder, if we could show some examples of how other people are starting to be maybe like the protesters and say, you know what, it's time for you to stand and separate from Justin Trudeau. We have interviewed some people from the Sikh Freedom Alliance who talk about how they feel Jagmeet is not representing their own community as well.
He has links with, he was part of World Economic Forum. Like I have questioned him in the past about his links to World Economic Forum, which was against the farmers' protest, and he's in it. So how can he have two faces, you know? And same with his message now that we are all white supremacists in this movement. And he talks about how India have been terrorizing Sikhs in India, right? But at the same time, now he's terrorizing Canadians. So he's trying to divide Canadians. He's doing the same thing that he talks about that he's doing it against. So a lot of people do not like him, like for his double-faced. And he's just like, he doesn't represent the Sikhs. Like the word Singh means lion, standing up against tyranny. And a lot of people are saying like he shouldn't carry that last name. He does not represent Sikhs.
Jagmeet is not at all about the community. In the 2019 election, it was my son's first time to vote. So I announced on Twitter and advertised around and word of mouth. I arranged up the street here a bubble tea party, and I would buy the bubble tea for any first-time voter, right? So I invited the Green, the Liberal, well, all the candidates. I invited them all. The Liberal candidate agreed to show up, but she didn't. At the end, she didn't show up. The Green and the Conservative, they both agreed to show up, and they did show up. Jagmeet didn't even answer, right? No reply, nothing.
Well, that's not surprising at all. He likes to not answer people, even though we have millions of viewers who want to hear what's going on in Canada from us. Take a look at how Jagmeet answered my colleague Sheila Gunn-Reid in the last election.
Polls show that your party is between 15 and 20%. No party here on the stage tonight is even close to representing a majority of Canadians. This is an absolute divided country. Yet when conservative journalists like me ask you fair questions on behalf of Canadians, you insult us and refuse to answer a single word. You are like a child putting your hands over your ears. Do you really think you can become Prime Minister by trying to freeze out any Canadian who disagrees with you? In your own riding, you only got 38% of the vote. Is this how you treat the other 62% of people who disagree with you?
No, thanks so much.
Well, it was great chatting with you. I didn't get a chance to be here, so I just kind of wanted to get a feel who was protesting here and calling him a puppet and why. So I'm glad you were there and you brought some insight to this area politically as well. So thank you so much for being on Rebel News.
Yeah, not at all, right? It's been a pleasure, and thanks for having me.
Drea Humphrey here with Rebel News, bringing you the other side of the story and following the facts where they lead. If you want to follow us and know more, make sure you do so by heading to our website at rebelnews.com. That way you can avoid big tech censorship. You can give us your phone number and your email so you always get the important stories in your location. Drea Humphrey, see you next time.